Chapter 9. The Ghost.
The grandmama's visit was almost over when Herr Canadat came to her one day. "The most unusual occurrence has arisen," he began. "I had almost given up hope."
Are you trying to tell me
Frau Sissemann interrupted.
that Heidi has learned to read?
The tutor stared in surprise. "Yes, indeed." Frau Sissemann just smiled, and that day at the dinner table, Heidi found her favorite storybook at her place.
Is it for me?
She asked.
To keep forever?
Forever.
Said the grandmama.
Even when I go home?
But you won't go home for a long time, will you, Heidi?
Clara interrupted.
I would miss you so much.
Heidi sighed and said nothing, but she hugged the book to her chest and slept with it under her pillow that night. Finally, the day for the grandmama's departure arrived, and Heidi grew even more forlorn. The house seemed as still as if everything had come to an end, and throughout the rest of the day, Clara and Heidi sat dejectedly and did not know what to do with themselves. When their lessons were over, Heidi announced,
I am going to read aloud to you, Clara, from the book Grandmama gave me.
However, it was not long after Heidi began her task that it all came to an end. She had scarcely begun to read a story about a dying grandmother when she suddenly screamed out loud,
Oh, the grandmother is dead!
and burst into pitiful weeping.
Now the grandmother is dead, and I can never go to her, and she has never had a single roll,
She cried. Clara tried to explain to Heidi that it was not the grandmother on the Alm, only one in a story who had died, but the girl could not calm herself. Meanwhile, Fräulein Rottenmeier had come into the room and heard Clara's attempt to explain Heidi's mistake. When the child continued sobbing, she said impatiently,
Adelheid, we have had enough of this screaming. If you ever again give vent to such behavior, I will take your book away from you.
Heidi turned pale with fright. The book was her treasure. She hastily dried her tears and did not cry again, no matter what she read. Instead, she saved her tears for her pillow, weeping for hours every night before falling asleep. Winter slowly became spring, and Heidi grew pale and thin with the effort of holding her homesickness inside. Fräulein Rottenmeier was also having problems. She had developed a nervous habit of looking over her shoulder for something strange was going on in the Sessemann house. No matter how carefully the housekeeper checked the locks on the doors and windows each evening, in the morning, the big front door stood wide open. How could that be? One night, she persuaded Sebastian and Johann, the coachman, to sit up and watch the front door. The two settled into a room off the front hall. As the hours passed and nothing happened, their eyes grew heavy, and soon the men were asleep. Sometime during the night, a cold draft wakened Sebastian. He jumped up and ran out into the hall. The door stood wide open. He turned to call Johann, and an icy shiver ran up his spine. On the stairway, something white flickered for a moment and was gone. When Fräulein Rottenmeier heard about the figure in white, she wrote immediately to Herr Sessemann. Her fingers were numb with fright. She said Herr Sessemann must come home immediately. Ghosts in the house might seriously damage his daughter's delicate health. Herr Sessemann returned at once.
This is nonsense,
he said the minute he stepped into the front hall.
Ghost, indeed! Sebastian, how could a grown man be so foolish? I will sit up tonight and get to the bottom of this.
That evening, Herr Sesemann settled down with several candles and a book to wait for the ghost. His pocket watch was showing 1 o'clock when a sound caught his attention. Was that soft click a key turning in the lock? He edged cautiously into the hall. The front door stood open, and the pale moonlight entered, lighting up a white form on the doorsill.
Who is there?
Herr Sesemann thundered. The figure turned round with a little scream. It was Heidi, with bare feet in her nightgown, looking confused and trembling like a leaf in the wind.
Child, what does this mean?
Demanded Herr Sesemann. White with fright, Heidi whispered.
I don't know.
Moved by her confusion and fear, he said more gently,
Come and sit down and tell me what the trouble is.
Herr Sesemann led Heidi into the small room beside the hall. Embers still burned in the fireplace, and the room was warm, but Heidi shivered so much that her teeth chattered.
Don't be afraid.
Herr Sesemann said soothingly, wrapping a shawl around the girl.
Tell me where you were going.
I was looking for the trees.
Heidi began.
Every night when I close my eyes, I see the firs outside my window at my grandfather's. The wind sings through the branches, and I ran outside to see the stars shining in the heavens. It is so beautiful. But when I open my eyes, it's gone. All I see are walls and streets, and I feel a great stone sitting on me right here.
Heidi lay her hand over her heart. Herr Sesemann sighed and took her cold little hands into his large warm ones.
Come, I'll tuck you into bed.
At 4:30 the next morning, Herr Sesemann rapped loudly on the housekeeper's door.
Make haste, Fraulein,
He called.
there is a journey to prepare for.
Then he went into his daughter's room and sat at the foot of her bed.
I know how much you love Heidi, Clara,
He said.
but she is so homesick she walks in her sleep. I was shocked to see how ill she looks. We must think of her and not just ourselves, my dear.
Clara wiped a tear from her eye.
You're right, Papa. I mustn't be selfish. She should go home. Please ask Sebastian to bring Heidi's trunk to my room so that I may pack some surprises for her. Oh, and Papa, there's something else.
Clara told her father the whole story about the white rolls, and he went off to tell Fräulein Rottenmeier to have a basket of fresh rolls packed immediately. Heidi had no idea why Tinette had arrived in her room with orders to dress her in the best of Clara's hand-me-down dresses. She was even more puzzled to find a tearful Clara in the dining room.
How I shall miss you.
Her friend cried. Heidi looked around in amazement.
You don't know anything about it,
said Herr Sesemann, laughing.
Well, you are going home today, Heidi, right after breakfast.
Home?
Repeated Heidi. She could hardly catch her breath.
Don't you want to know something about it?
Oh, yes.
She cried.
Well then, so you shall. The carriage is being made ready to take you to the train. Sebastian will accompany you back to Dorfli. Now, eat a good breakfast and then go with Clara to pack your things.
Heidi was too excited to eat, and Clara was already finished. So Sebastian wheeled Clara to her bedroom. In the middle of the floor stood a large trunk.
Come see what I have packed for you.
Clara called to her friend. The trunk held stacks of dresses and aprons, handkerchiefs and sewing things.
And see here, Heidi.
She added, holding up a basket of 12 soft white rolls. Heidi crowed with delight. Both girls had entirely forgotten that the moment had come for them to part. And when the call was heard,
"The carriage is ready!"
there was no time left to be sad. Heidi ran to her room to get her beautiful storybook from its place beneath her pillow. She put it in the basket with the rolls. In her closet, she found her old red shawl and her battered straw hat. Tinette had not thought them worth packing. Heidi wrapped the hat in the shawl and set the bundle on top of the basket. Then she put on a fine hat Clara had given her and left the room. The two children had to say a speedy farewell, for the carriage was waiting.
I shall miss you so much.
Clara exclaimed.
But Papa has promised me that next spring we will come visit you in the mountains.
Oh, Clara, you must come. The mountains will make you stronger, just the way they made me stronger.
Fraulein Rottenmeier interrupted their goodbyes by taking the little red bundle out of Heidi's basket and throwing it on the floor.
No, Adelheid, you cannot leave this house carrying a thing such as that,
she said.
"Let the child take what she wishes."
Herr Sesemann said sharply.
"Now, my dear Heidi, here is a letter and a package for your grandfather. Do not lose it. Sebastian will see you safely home."
Clutching the precious hat under one arm and the letter and package under the other, Heidi was lifted into the carriage.
Goodbye,
called Clara.
"Pleasant journey,"
her father added.
Thank you.
Heidi called out the carriage window as Johann the coachman flicked his whip, and they set off for the railway station. Questions. 1. What was the unusual occurrence that had arisen in the house when the grandmama's visit was almost over? 2. What did the grandmama send Heidi as a present for Heidi's effort? 3. Whom did the dying grandmother in the storybook remind Heidi of? 4. What troubles did the housekeeper have when spring came? 5. What did Sebastian and Johann see when they were ordered to sit up and watch the front door during the night? 6. Was the house really haunted? 7. What was the truth of the ghost story? 8. What did the master of the house do after finding out the truth? 9. Who would accompany Heidi back to Dorfli? 10. What did Heidi carry along with her on her way back to the Alm uncle's hut?